you're a sexual health enthusiast. What drew you into sexual and reproductive health education, and what continues to motivate you today?
Yeah, I would say, oh, there's so many different things. My mother was my mother was always I'm the eldest of 3 girls, and so there was always a conversation around, and perhaps you can resonate with this as also a fellow Caribbean, like, "Don't bring no babies here. Don't have sex. If you have sex, use a condom." That was, like, my sex ed at home, and she
Okay.
was so direct about it, and it was a little off-putting to me because I was young. I remember when I first, got my menstrual cycle, that was a conversation, and I was like, "What? I don't even know how to put this thing in my panties for real, and you're talking about babies." So conversations around sex and sexuality happened very early for me, maybe like 10, 11, which is in now I would say that's late, but it happened early in my home. And then it was just really curiosity for me. And as I navigated college, I really got to see how many of us went into this 4-year bubble with no information, right? And coming out of college and learning about the field of public health, I was like, wow, I really was drawn to pregnancy prevention, teen pregnancy prevention specifically. My childhood best friend at the time got pregnant when she was, I think, like 15, 16, and I was a little bit younger than her. And I just kind of saw her navigate pregnancy, and I just was fascinated by it. And so I was interested in teen pregnancy prevention and did some volunteer work and assistantships in undergrad and grad school, and then fell into teaching young women. I don't know that I knew that the field of sex ed was even a thing, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. But it was just curiosity, and then like, how do we prevent teen pregnancy, right? What does that look like? And education was always just naturally where my brain went to.
Those messages definitely do resonate with me coming from the Caribbean as well. So I agree with that. And you made a comment saying that you learned about sex ed to some extent when you were 10, 11 from like your parents, and you shared that like that might be too late. Talk
Hmm.
about that.
Okay. Ooh, let's get into it. You know what? It's funny. That's actually not a full true story, because my mom was really good at like, as the oldest girl, my mom was really good about like body autonomy. If someone touched you here, what are you gonna do? You're just gonna cry? What if someone says they have a lollipop or some candy, but if they give you the candy, like she would do these scenarios, these role plays, and it was very jarring to me, right? But now adult me is like, this was bodily autonomy, this was consent. This was, who are my trusted adults? All the lessons that I try to talk to my 4-year-old nephew about, right? What is your comfort circle? What does it mean privacy? Your private parts. Who are allowed to touch them? Who are allowed to help you clean them? And I think oftentimes when people think about sex ed and they think about sexual reproductive health education, they don't look at it as a life skill. And they also don't think about consent or bodily autonomy as something that can start at two, right? When we are forcing our 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds to kiss Uncle so and
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
and if they don't want to kiss Uncle so and so, we have to be okay with that. That's
Mm-hmm.
not disrespectful. That's teaching that child, if it is something, as long as you're not being disrespectful, if it is something that you don't feel comfortable doing, you don't do, right? And so that's when I say, as far as talking about sex or like sexual intercourse, 10 and 11 fell early, but bodily autonomy is something that we should be teaching our young children from the moment. I'm talking about, this is your penis. This is not your PP. This is not your tool. This is not, it's the vagina. It's the vulva, right? It's not your cookie. So worst case, it is sexual violence prevention, because if someone is harming that young person, they now have the language for the body parts to be able to communicate it with their trusted adult, whether that's a caregiver, a grandparent, etc. And so, it can start as early as 2, 3, as long as it's age and stage appropriate. You wouldn't be having a conversation with a 4-year-old about the different types of latex condoms that exist. That's not reality, right? But we will be having conversations around boundaries and bodily autonomy.
I appreciate you lifting that up. And I think that is an important conversation to have. And I think with guests that I've had in the past that have spoken about this, they've spoken to the fact that, it's about being able to communicate and having like healthy conversations at an early age. And like to your point, I feel like it's changing a little bit now with like, oh, go hug that person or go kiss that person, and like more nowadays people are more wary of those kinds of things. But I think it's so important for youth and everyone to understand like that bodily autonomy part of things. And like, and I think about this a lot nowadays. I feel like more so nowadays in just how the things that we are taught and how we operate in life from an early stage really can dictate how things happen to us later on, or how we like perceive those things happening. And this is like one of the best preventative methods or education approaches for people to just kind of understand more about themselves physically and how to, I guess, respectfully show up. I don't know if that's the like correct phrasing, but yeah.
How to be a good global citizen, right? Period. Like how to be a good global citizen. If you're on the train and there are all these seats made available to you and you come sit next to me, you are violating my bodily autonomy. You know, like, and that's why the hill that I am willing to die on is sexual reproductive health is a life skill, period. Every component of sexual reproductive health can be applied to different aspects in our lives. And I think that is some way or another, we're able to market sexual reproductive health in a way that people understand that consent is not just about sexual experiences, right? Consent is, hey, can I borrow your pen? Yes, you may. No, you may not. Right. And I think once people get a better understanding of it, they'll understand when I say things like start having conversations at 3. If your brother wants to borrow your toy and you don't want him to borrow your toy, we got to be able to have that and respect that boundary. And so yeah, there are so many things, especially culturally, that I think of that I'm like, huh, this was a missed opportunity, right? And so when I am talking to my nephews or having conversations, I try my best to instill in them values that weren't instilled in me, and not because of anyone's fault. I don't think people had the tools, right? The language that now I have, especially being in this work for so long.